The truth about that night. When I found my dad's old journal in the attic, the last entry made my blood run cold. She can never know the truth about that night. I dropped the leather-bound book immediately, my hands recoiling as if it had burned me. It hit the dusty attic floor with a dull thud, falling open to that damning page. For a moment, I just stared at it from above, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, despite every instinct screaming at me to leave it alone, I crouched down and picked it up again. The book had been wedged behind a box of Christmas decorations, its pages yellowed with age and secrets. I'd only gone up to the attic to look for Mom's old sewing machine. She'd been asking about it for weeks, reminiscing about the quilts she used to make when I was little. Dad had been gone for 3 years now, and we were finally ready to sort through his things. But now, standing in the dim attic light with trembling hands, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to pretend I hadn't seen those words. I wasn't going to put the journal back and forget about it. Whatever truth my father had been hiding, I was going to find it. The journal fell open to that final entry, dated just 2 days before his sudden heart attack. The handwriting was shaky, unlike his usual precise script, as if he'd been trembling while he wrote. March 15th, 2021. The nightmares are getting worse. Every time I close my eyes, I see Sarah's face that night. So young, so trusting. She was only 19 then, barely older than Emma is now. God forgive me, but I can't tell her. Not after all these years. She deserves to remember her mother the way she does, as the perfect woman who died too young. She can never know the truth about that night. If something happens to me, I pray this journal burns with me. Some secrets should die with the guilty. My hands shook as I read the words again. Sarah, that was my mother's name. She'd died in a car accident when I was 2, or at least that's what Dad had always told me. A drunk driver on a rainy night, he'd said. Quick and painless, she hadn't suffered. But this entry suggested something else entirely. Something that had haunted my father for over 20 years. I flipped through the journal's earlier pages, my heart pounding. Most entries were mundane. Work complaints, grocery lists, brief notes about my school events. But scattered throughout were cryptic references that I'd never noticed before, fragments that suddenly seemed significant. September 3rd, 2020. Emma asked about the accident again today. I told her the same story. The lies get easier each time, but the guilt never fades. November 12th, 2020. Saw Detective Morrison at the grocery store. He looked right through me. Does he know? Did he always know? January 8th, 2021. Found Emma looking through old photos. She said she has Mom's eyes. If only she knew what those eyes had seen. I sat in the dusty attic, surrounded by boxes of my childhood memories, trying to process what I was reading. My father, the man who'd raised me alone, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework and walked me down the aisle at my wedding, had been lying to me my entire life. The official story had always been so simple, so clean. Mom was driving home from her job at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. It was raining. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car. She died instantly. Dad had to identify the body. It was too traumatic for a 2-year-old to attend the funeral. But now, with trembling fingers, I was reading something entirely different. December 22nd, 2020. Christmas is coming. Emma wants to put flowers on Sarah's grave again. I'll drive her there, stand beside her, and pretend I'm mourning an accident. But I'll really be mourning what I did. What I couldn't prevent. What I covered up. Covered up? My mind raced through possibilities, each one more horrifying than the last. Had my father killed my mother? Had he been the drunk driver? Was that why he'd never touched alcohol in all the years I'd known him? I needed to know more. I needed to understand what that night referred to, and why the truth was so terrible that my father preferred to take it to his grave. I climbed down from the attic, the journal clutched against my chest, and went to my old bedroom. Dad had kept it exactly as I'd left it when I moved out at 18. Pink walls, boy band posters, a shelf full of participation trophies. On my dresser sat the only photo I had of my mother and me together. She was holding me as a baby, smiling at the camera with those eyes everyone said I'd inherited. Just as I was staring at the photo, trying to process everything I'd read, my phone rang. The sudden sound in the quiet house made me jump so violently that I nearly dropped the journal. My heart was already racing from the revelations, and now it felt like it might burst from my chest. "Hello?" I answered, my voice shaky. "Emma?" Oh, thank God. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, and she sounded frantic. "I've been trying to reach you for 20 minutes. There are police cars outside your father's house. I mean your house now, and I got so worried when I saw you go in earlier, but then saw all the commotion." The words hit me like ice water. "Police cars? What are you talking about?" "3 of them just pulled up. Officers are walking around the property with flashlights. I thought something terrible had happened to you." Her voice was rising with panic. Looking at her face now, I tried to see beyond the image I'd built in my mind over the years. Dad had always described her as perfect, kind, selfless, devoted to her family. But what if that wasn't the whole truth? What if there had been another side to Sarah Mitchell that I'd never been allowed to know? I grabbed my laptop and started searching. If there had been a cover-up, there might be records, police reports, newspaper articles, something that would give me the real story. The first search for Sarah Mitchell car accident 1999 brought up nothing unusual, just a brief mention in the local paper's police blotter. "Fatal traffic collision claims life of local nurse." No details, no follow-up stories. For someone who'd supposedly been killed by a drunk driver, there was remarkably little coverage. I tried searching for Detective Morrison, the name my father had mentioned. It took some digging, but I found him, retired now, living in a nursing home across town. According to his LinkedIn profile, he'd spent 30 years with the police department, specializing in homicide investigations. Homicide, not traffic accidents. My blood ran cold. Why would a homicide detective be involved in what was supposed to be a simple car crash? I knew I had to talk to him, but first I needed to prepare myself. I spent the rest of the day reading through every page of my father's journal, looking for clues. The entries became more fragmented and guilt-ridden as they progressed, painting a picture of a man slowly being consumed by a secret he couldn't share. February 14th, 2021. Emma brought me flowers for Valentine's Day. Said she hoped I'd find love again someday. How can I tell her that love died the night her mother did? That I've been living a lie ever since? February 28th, 2021. The dreams are getting worse. I see her in the kitchen that night, see the fear in her eyes when she realized what I knew. See her running for the car, see what happened next. March 10th, 2021. Emma's pregnant. She's going to be a mother, just like Sarah was. God help me. What if history repeats itself? What if the darkness that was in Sarah is in Emma too? That last entry hit me like a physical blow. I was 4 months pregnant with my first child, and Dad had been worried about some kind of darkness being passed down? What darkness? What had my mother done that was so terrible? The next morning, I drove to Sunset Manor Nursing Home, my father's journal hidden in my purse. Detective Morrison was easy to find, a thin man in his 70s, sitting in the common room and working on a crossword puzzle. When I introduced myself as Sarah Mitchell's daughter, his face went pale. "Emma," he said slowly, "you look just like her." "I need to know what really happened that night," I said, sitting across from him. "I found my father's journal. I know there was more to it than a car accident." Detective Morrison set down his pencil and studied my face for a long moment. "Your father was a good man," he said finally. "Whatever he wrote in that journal, remember that. He was trying to protect you." "From what? From the truth about my mother?" He sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 74 years. "From the truth about what your mother was going to do." The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. I waited, knowing that whatever he said next would change everything I thought I knew about my family. "Your mother wasn't driving home from work that night," Detective Morrison said quietly. "She was running away. She'd packed a bag, taken money from your college fund, and was planning to disappear, without you. The room seemed to spin around me. That's impossible. Dad always said she loved me more than anything. She did love you. That's what made it so complicated. Detective Morrison leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Your mother was struggling with severe postpartum depression and psychosis. It had gotten worse after you were born, but your father didn't understand how serious it was. Nobody did back then. Mental health wasn't talked about the way it is now. So she was leaving because she was sick? She was leaving because she was convinced she was going to hurt you. His words hit me like a sledgehammer. She'd been having intrusive thoughts, violent thoughts about harming her own child. She was terrified of what she might do, so she decided the only way to keep you safe was to leave. I thought about my father's journal entry about darkness being passed down, about his fear when he learned I was pregnant. Had he been worried about postpartum depression? About the possibility that I might suffer the same way my mother had? Your father tried to stop her, Detective Morrison continued. He followed her to the car, tried to convince her to stay and get help instead of running. They argued in the driveway. She was crying, saying she was a monster, that you'd be better off without her. She got in the car and started backing out. And then what happened? She was so distraught, so focused on getting away, that she didn't see the tree. She backed right into it, going fast enough that... He trailed off, unable to finish. Fast enough to kill her. The impact broke her neck. It was instant, just like your father always told you. But it wasn't a drunk driver on a busy street. It was your mother in your own driveway trying to run away from the illness in her mind. The nursing home common room faded around me as I processed this information. My mother hadn't died in some random accident. She'd died trying to protect me from herself, convinced that her love for me wasn't enough to overcome the darkness in her thoughts. Why didn't Dad tell me the truth? Because he blamed himself, Detective Morrison said sadly. He thought if he'd recognized the signs earlier, gotten her help sooner, maybe she'd still be alive. He made me promise to keep the real cause of death quiet. Said you deserved to remember your mother as the loving woman she was, not as someone who'd been broken by mental illness. But people would have understood. Postpartum depression isn't something to be ashamed of. Not in 1999, it wasn't. There was still so much stigma around mental health, especially when it involved mothers and children. Your father was terrified that if the truth came out, people would judge your mother, judge your family. He wanted to protect her memory and protect you from having to carry that burden. I sat in silence for several minutes, trying to reconcile this new information with everything I'd believed about my parents. My father hadn't been covering up a crime. He'd been covering up a tragedy. My mother hadn't abandoned me for selfish reasons. She'd tried to abandon me to save me. There's something else, Detective Morrison said gently. Your father asked me to give this to you if you ever came looking for answers. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Dad's handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means you found my journal and spoke to Detective Morrison. I'm sorry you had to learn the truth this way, but I couldn't bring myself to tell you while I was alive. Your mother was the strongest person I ever knew, but she was fighting a battle that nobody understood back then. The thoughts that plagued her weren't her fault. They were symptoms of an illness that she couldn't control. She loved you so much that she was willing to sacrifice her own happiness to keep you safe. I've spent 22 years wondering if I made the right choice in keeping this from you. I told myself I was protecting you, but maybe I was really protecting myself. I couldn't bear the thought of you looking at me differently, knowing that I'd failed to save the woman we both loved. I need you to know that your mother's illness doesn't define her, and it doesn't define you. Yes, there's a genetic component to postpartum depression and psychosis, but that doesn't mean you're doomed to suffer the same fate. Medicine has come so far since then. There's help available now that wasn't available to your mother. If you ever find yourself struggling after your baby is born, please don't suffer in silence the way she did. Get help. Talk to someone. Remember that asking for support isn't weakness, it's strength. I love you more than words can express, and I'm sorry for keeping this secret for so long. Your mother loved you too, more than her own life. Never doubt that. All my love, Dad. P.S. There's one more thing in the safe behind my bedroom dresser. The combination is your birthday. I think you're ready to see it now. I drove home in a daze, my father's letter clutched in my passenger seat. Everything I thought I knew about my family had been turned upside down, but somehow I felt more connected to both my parents than I ever had before. At home, I moved Dad's dresser and found the small safe he'd mentioned. Inside was a video camera and several tapes labeled with dates from 1998 and 1999. My heart pounding, I set up the camera and inserted the first tape. My mother's face appeared on the screen, young and radiant, holding me as a baby. But as I watched, I could see the shadows my father had written about, the exhaustion in her eyes, the forced quality of her smile. In later videos, she looked increasingly strained, often holding me at arm's length or handing me off to my father quickly. The final video was dated just a week before her death. My mother was sitting alone in front of the camera, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know who will see this," she said to the camera, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe nobody. Maybe that's for the best. But I need to say this somewhere, somehow." She took a shaky breath. "I love my daughter more than life itself, but I'm so scared of what I might do to her. The thoughts in my head. They're not me. They're not who I want to be, but they're getting stronger, and I don't know how to make them stop." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "If something happens to me, I need Emma to know that I tried to be a good mother. I tried to love her the way she deserves to be loved. But sometimes love means knowing when to step away, even when it breaks your heart." The video ended there, and I sat in my living room sobbing for the mother I'd never really known and the father who'd carried her secrets for over 2 decades. 3 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. I named her Sarah, after the grandmother she would never meet, but whose story would always be part of our family's history. I didn't suffer from postpartum depression, but I was vigilant about my mental health in those early weeks and months. I had a support system in place, doctors who understood the risks, and most importantly, I had the truth about my family's past. My daughter will grow up knowing her grandmother's real story, not just the sanitized version my father had constructed, but the full truth about a woman who loved her child so much that she was willing to sacrifice everything to keep her safe. She'll know that mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of, and that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. As I hold my baby daughter and see my mother's eyes looking back at me, I finally understand what my father meant when he wrote that some secrets should die with the guilty. He wasn't guilty of a crime. He was guilty of loving 2 women so much that he was willing to carry the weight of their pain alone. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves, and sometimes the truth, however painful, is the only thing that can set us free. My mother died trying to protect me from her darkness, and my father lived trying to protect me from that truth. Now it's my turn to protect my daughter, not by hiding from our family's history, but by facing it with honesty, compassion, and hope. The truth about that night wasn't what I expected, but it was what I needed to hear. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I truly know both of my parents. Not as the perfect figures I'd imagined, but as flawed, loving human beings who did the best they could with the knowledge and resources they had. That night, as I put my daughter to bed, I whispered a promise to her and to the grandmother she'll never meet. No more secrets, no more shame, just love and truth and the courage to ask for help when we need it. Outside, it started to rain, a gentle spring shower that reminded me of new beginnings and second chances. Somewhere in that rain, I imagined my parents finally at peace, their long-held secrets finally released into the light where they belonged. The truth had indeed set us all free.